Welcome to the latest episode of Here's What We Know, the podcast of unexpected conversations. You know, some of my favorite episodes is when I get to catch up with someone who's been on previously, and that's what I'm doing today. Hey, first of all, I want to invite you to share this episode, let people know about it. Also, please support our sponsors, because without them, we're not doing this, right? But today, I'm having back on Darren Haruo Rae, who is the director and the creative force behind the film Nisei, which is a very personal story to you, but also you've got an exciting update, and that's what we're all in for that. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me back. Like, it's always great to chat with you. So
I have so much fun because, last time we film nerded out because
we didn't even talk about the movie. We just kind of went off on tangents about movies we liked and stuff.
Yeah, movies we liked and superheroes and what it's like. Because I don't ever get to ask somebody, what do you think the thought process behind this is? Or what do you think, how does this happen? How do they create? And you're right, I never got around to asking you about Nisei because, and first of all, tell everybody what happened. Tell everybody the good news.
So I think last time I was on your show, we talked about Nisei, my film, was going to be playing at the Cinequest International Film Festival in San Jose. And so we played there, went super successful, and we ended up winning the grand jury prize for Best Dramatic Short. And because of that, we are now Academy qualified. So this coming year or going into next year, we're doing our push to try to make the Academy Awards.
So that would be amazing because you're qualified. Now it's a matter of getting nominated.
Mm-hmm. Right.
How does that process work?
So there's basically Academy voting members, and we have a couple ways where our film will go up on the Academy screening room. So anyone who's a voting member could go and watch that, as well as we're going to be having a couple of for your consideration events. We'll send out some invites and welcome people to come to these screenings. We're going to have a few in Los Angeles as well as San Francisco. I recommend if someone's a voting member to come out and take a look. On top of our film, we're going to be hosting Q&A sessions afterwards, just not only about the film itself, but just about, the 442nd and the internment camps in the community, and really making it this, sort of all-encompassing experience of fun film stuff, but also the educational side of it too. So
if you get nominated or if you win, how do you get to become a voting member?
So my understanding of that,
and again, I'm asking you, and I know you don't know everything, and so I don't have anybody else to ask, because that's why I'm asking.
Right. No, it's definitely been a learning curve for me too, because one, we didn't expect to win, let alone at a qualifying festival. And so it was kind of, not to say the film's bad or anything like that, but it's you always kind of, you tamper your expectations. You don't want to go into a thing like this is, we're going to sweep in the greatest thing ever. But it's really been a learning experience for us just in terms of what's the next steps for this. And so for us, it's like you said, hopefully getting members to view it, getting to vote on it. And then basically you make a short list, which they announce publicly, which is a much, I think it's 15 films this year. And then from that short list, they narrow it down to the top, I think 5 or 6. And those are the ones when you watch the Academy Awards, you'll see those nominations with the little clip from them before they announce the single.
How did you find out that you won?
So funny enough, being born and raised in the Bay Area and actually going to San Jose State, we went up for Cinequest Film Festival, but before the award ceremony, we had to leave back down to Los Angeles because of work. I had a job down here. And so literally myself and my girlfriend, who's my producer, Jessica Olthoff, we're sitting on the couch and it's Cinequest started their live stream for the awards. And we're just sitting down watching a movie, eating dinner. And so we just open it up on Instagram and watch the live stream. And they're and the winner is Nisei. And we're just did we hear that right? Did the audio chop out? Did our internet fall apart? We're scrambling, trying to figure out, because they didn't post anything because it was a live broadcast. And so it was basically 2 hours of just living in this limbo of I'm 90% sure they said that, but we have no idea. And then it came through and it was confirmed.
So again, let me paint that picture. You and Jennifer are sat around, and she was your producer on this film. Not only your girlfriend, but she was your producer. And you're just having dinner, and you're all right, we'll just watch this. You weren't expecting anything.
No.
And then all of a sudden they go, and the grand prize winner goes to Nisei.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys are honestly not even sure you heard it right.
Right. Because it's on Instagram Live too. And so, it gets a little choppy once in a while. And like, they said that, right? Like, we're double checking. We're like texting people, like, were you watching this too? Like, trying to figure out if it was confirmed. So,
What was that? I mean, there had to be tears. I mean, were they just, or was it just too excited giggles, or did you sleep at all that night?
it was kind of a slow burn in the sense of like, we're like, okay, so we've accepted that we're pretty sure we won. That means we're Academy qualifying, right? What does that mean? And so we started doing all this research on the Academy stuff because we had no idea on this too. And a lot of that is kind of hard to find. And so it's like I said, 2 hours of me like Googling, like, is this an Academy qualifying festival? What does that mean? What are the next steps? And then, so it was more like, I don't want to say panic, but there was like an energy of like trying to problem solve more than kind of excitement. And so then once they finally said it, and then we were 100% sure, like I remember I just kind of like laid on the floor. I was like, okay, now it's starting to set in, and that this is, a very real thing. And so it wasn't right when they said it. It was more like, I would say like later down the night. And yeah, it was very hard to sleep. So
Yeah, it takes a bit because because of the time, even when you found out, you didn't know, right? It's like I shared the story. My youngest son was born we didn't know if he was going to make it, right? We didn't know if he was going to make it. And at the time, I wasn't, I knew I was just too, okay, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? And he'd asked me later, he goes, were you scared? I said, I wasn't scared then because I didn't know you.
right.
But I knew that as the years went by, now when I think about it, I get scared to death because now I know what I would have missed. Right. And so like same thing for you, you didn't know what was happening at the time. And as this journey goes on, that night will become even a bigger thing because let's say you do get nominated. Let's say you do win. I mean, it all started with dinner, watching Instagram Live, right? And not even knowing what you didn't know at the time.
Mm.
So,
right. Yeah, it's always funny you hear those stories about, like someone just not expecting it or just like doing something completely different. And the next thing overnight things change. And it's still, it's still a very long shot. There's a lot of great films out there this year, and we still have to like I said, do the couple rounds of it. But just the fact that we're even allowed to do that now and do this push, like it's first and foremost, like I made the film. I think we talked about this last time. I made the film for my family. I made it for the Japanese American community, and the festival run and everything else was just kind of bonus to me at that point. So this is just kind of continuing on like extra cool things that are coming out of it. So
it checks all the boxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's such a personal film. This is a film about your grandfather, right? Mm-hmm. And your grandfather and his brother and their experience fighting for the U.S. in World War II. While meanwhile, their family's back in internment camps, and it's, I know we talked about that, but I don't know if I dove into it as much. How did that come? Where did it come from? I mean, you say it's with your grandfather. I mean, I didn't know my grandfathers had passed by the time I was born. But did you have those conversations with him? Or were these just stories? I think I read somewhere where you said you actually had tape of him talking about his experiences.
Yeah. So, like, obviously I grew up around him and I would hear little things here and there. And again, it was, kind of PG because I was a kid. So my grandfather would never go into too much detail. But yeah, he had these full recordings that the National Museum did a few years back. They tried to do it with as many veterans as possible. And so that was kind of like my blueprint, first and foremost, being able to do that. And again, he still didn't delve into too much like little detail stuff. And I don't think he actually like would remember specific names of towns or anything like that. But he would say these like, oh, I remember this mountain. I remember this thing. And I actually have a lot of historical books about the 442nd. So it's like troop movement, like where they were stationed, stuff like that. And so I kind of like used his interview as the blueprint and then would look at maps and kind of blueprint out of like, oh, he was actually here. And like I'd find photos that we actually have that were unmarked. But then it's like, for example, there's like this one photo of like a bunch of the Nisei soldiers standing all in a row and they're holding this flag. And we had no idea where it was, no markings on it or anything like that. And Jessica, my producer, her stepfather, who's a Marine, he actually goes, that's a banner ceremony. And we're like, what's that? And he goes, that's actually in military record. That's an actual ceremony that they would catalog. And so we went back through and matched it based off of the logos on the flags and stuff like that. And we're like, oh, that's the liberation of Rome. My grandfather was in Rome at that point. And so we're able to kind of build out the timeline and kind of the locations that way too. But I think the biggest thing about it is, at the end of the day, it is a fiction piece in the sense of like you have to build it around the budget and what's capable, and you still have to make it like an interesting enough piece, right? And so I always kind of say like my family is like the vessel for what the entire community went through, like based off the camps and based on the unit and stuff like that. And so it's like taking those liberties, me as a filmmaker, me and like as my grandfather too, it's like you want to tell history right, but it's also like you have to not be afraid to like get so like I think when you get so invested and you want to coddle it too much, then it makes you too fearful to try to make it or try to take risks and stuff like that. And so once I kind of took a step back from it and said like, this is a story about the whole Japanese American community and how would I approach that, and taking inspirations from stories that he told me throughout and using that as to kind of plot it out.
Did you have to guard against being too emotional or too mechanical? If you had to go one with the other, which is the one that you feared the most?
I think I was fearful of not being mechanical enough, in the sense of like, I always feel like there's always more research you could have done. There's always more people you could have talked to, right? And so there's always that fear that not that I'm like afraid of being called out saying you did something wrong, but it's like, for me, my own personal like volition, I want to get it right. I want to share it in a light that makes people look at these people as heroes and wants to do research and wants to champion them. And so I think that goes back to, being like, okay, this is inspired by my grandfather. You get very paranoid. You get paranoid that you don't want to mess this up. You want to put his name in good light and stuff like that. And so it's finding that kind of way to pull yourself out of it and treat it as a story first, and then go back into the emotional part. And I will say, like, to that sense, like even when we're making it, while we're making it, kind of going back to even like the Cinequest, like finding out we won, making it the entire time, it was just straight to business, show up to set every day, get it done. We're in this time crunch, shoot everything. Like, not that I was like not unemotional, but it was very much like, this is a film. We have to get these things done by the end of the day. And then on the last day, not to spoil the film, but the last day we're shooting on this hillside and it's the big grand finale shot. And that was the last thing we shot too, which is the last scene in the movie. We shoot that and we say cut and the movie's wrapped. And I literally just feel like, thousands of pounds just like fall off my body. And it was very vulnerable, and I didn't realize how vulnerable it was going to be at that moment. And literally, like, myself and the actors, we literally just kind of laid on the hillside together and just kind of like for like 45 minutes and just took deep breaths and, couple tears, stuff like that. Because I told you, like, my actors, they have direct connections too. Like Brent Yoshida, his grandparents were in Manzanar, and my main lead, Jonathan Tanagaki, he's second generation. He's Nisei as well too. And so, like, once we finished it, it was very emotional for all of us. And I didn't expect that to hit me all at once. So.
Well, we touched on it the last time, but I mean, just there was so much in my world. I call it fate, but let's be more generic. Let's call it serendipity, right?
Mm-hmm.
That with Jonathan, like, you're trying to cast this person. You're trying to find this guy who represents your grandfather. You're trying to find someone who can act. You're trying to find somebody that has, it's a visual medium. You're trying to find somebody who has that look, right?
Mm.
And the story of Jonathan is he was the first guy who reached out.
Yeah, he was like one of the first ones to reply to the submission, send in a self-tape and said all this stuff. And I think I told you last time, like, I was like, this is too good to be true. Like, this is.
That's what I'm saying.
It doesn't work like that.
I mean, so many things fell into place that you found your guy. And I would think, and by the way, did I call her Jennifer a while ago? It's Jessica, isn't it?
Jessica, yeah.
Yeah. Tell her she can call me Larry if she wants. It's totally fine. I do that. I just did a podcast where I was trying to say Daniel Craig, and then there was Roger Moore. Daniel Craig was talking about Bond, and I ended up saying Roger Daltrey and Roger Craig, the old 49er halfback.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it happens. There's too many names up here. But the fact that all of those fell into place because so many things, and we touched on this last time, but I still think it's fascinating. So many things have to happen. I mean, there's no even the simplest things, right? Maybe it's just one guy in one shot in front of a tent. There's so many people we're not seeing on there, isn't there?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, if you ever see like behind the scenes or even just look at a credit of any like major movie where it's just like, the lead, Bradley Cooper, these names, and then you're sitting there for 10 minutes as, 500 names go by. And like some of them you're like, I don't even know what that title is. I don't know. Like I have no concept of like what the thing is. And like, like especially when you get into like visual effects and all that stuff too, it's like all these little details where it's like I had a friend who worked in animation, and it's like his whole thing was like, oh, I made the smoke for this one scene for that one shot, but that took me 6 months to make. And it's like, that's obviously different than a live action medium, but it's like the understanding of like how much passion and detail go into this stuff. And even for us, like we had a fairly decent sized crew for being a short film, and we needed that being a period piece, and having like period correct costumes and stunts and pyrotechnics and the bus and all that stuff. And so it's like I always say like when people come out of school, it's like people always ask like, where do you start? It's like obviously being a production assistant is important. Like from production assistant to someone who's even like crafty, like you don't think about like needing waters on set and needing snacks on set and stuff like that. And it's like all these little pieces that don't ever get the proper recognition or credit. But it's like, if those things weren't there, the entire project would never happen. So,
speaking of which, I think one of the cool trends that have happened now, especially on animated films, if you stay through it all the way to the end, because you want the extra scene at the end, they always have the names of the children who were conceived and born during production.
That's like a 5-year window, probably. So
yeah. You don't have kids yet, right?
No.
So you don't stay through all the crud that the rest of us do, right? And so, yeah, this has become a trend now on every animated movie. Every one you see now, at the end, they have a list of the names, and there's sometimes dozens of names. Dozens. It's mind-blowing how many people it takes to do a movie. Now, again, and I do want to still, I don't want to lose the serendipitous thing, because so many things happened to you on this film. Like it was meant to be, right?
Right.
That's just my take. That's my opinion. That's my faith running through, is it was meant to be. This story had to be told. And a lot of things went right.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if we talked about this last time, but even like kind of the first thing that always comes to mind when we talk about that is getting a period correct bus, like a 1945 Greyhound bus, where that's how it was written in the original script. And right off the bat, we're like, okay, we're going to have to change that. There's no way we're going to find a bus. And I just wrote it just because like that was based off real life. My grandfather took the bus and did all this stuff. And so it's like, maybe we have them just like walking. Maybe we try to find like a school bus and just show the inside or something like that. And then like, I think it was like a month before we're about to shoot or something, like this guy just happens to come into the production office, because we're at San Jose State at the time, like partnering with the school. And they go up to our executive producer, and San Jose downtown has this like history in the park thing. And they're like, hey, like we have these history things. Like this year we're focusing actually on the Japanese American focus and stuff like that. And he's like, you do know what we're making this year, right? You do know the film we're making. And he tells them, and he goes, oh, you do know in Fremont, there's a bus museum. And we're like, what? And he goes, yeah, they have a bus, and here's his number, and just give us his contact. And we called them up, and the guy there was literally like, yeah, we have a 1940s Greyhound bus. We literally just happened to fix it, like 1 week ago. Like it hasn't been running for 2 years because we needed this one piece for a brake that they don't make anymore, and we had to 3D print it. We finally just happened to fix it. And so we go, and we're like the first ones to test drive it with them too. And so it, like you talk about like the serendipity of it, where it's just like all these pieces just kind of fell into place in the perfect timing. And then like our costume designer, Rachel, she was able to reach out to like, oh, I know this guy, Francis, who has World War II uniforms. Then you find out his father was in the unit too. And these uniforms aren't just like replicas. Like a lot of them were surplus from the war that Warner Brothers bought for their John Wayne films. And then he bought them and stuff like that. And so it's like all these little happy accidents or kind of like twists of fate all just lined up perfectly as we shot it. So
I'm just saying, Darren, I'm just saying, you can call it coincidences all you want. Right. I think it's harder to believe things just happen just the right way, just cause. I think it's harder. In my opinion, that this was the story that needed to be told. you were the person who needed to tell it, because it literally was a direct, it's not that it was just your grandfather's story. It was the people of that era, the Japanese American community of that era. It was their story. And that you brought that out, the double sides of their lives, right? The things they faced on both sides. You know, it's amazing. And that's why I said it checks all the boxes when it comes to the Academy Awards, right? Because Academy Awards love period pieces. They do. They love something that reflects a true event. Not that it was the exact story that your grandfather led, but it was a true event that these happened. And it was handled in a delicate and emotional, but ought not overly emotional way. I mean, dude, this, I don't know. I got a good feeling about this, man. I just got a really good feeling about this.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it all, like I said, it's lining up, and we've been really fortunate. We actually were able to share it with a couple of, like museums. We filmed at the San Jose Japanese American Museum, but we also last month we showed it, or at the beginning of this month we showed it for. It's called the Friends and Family of Nisei Veterans, and it's this group that held reunion tours every single year and kind of tried to keep the stories alive and stuff like that. And so they actually reached me, and I was able to play it at their reunion tour this year. And so I got to go and meet a lot of great people. I met 2 veterans that were still alive and talk to them. They were in different units than my grandfather, but it was still like really, it was a lot being able to talk to them and kind of like seeing, like kind of going back to my childhood and talking with my grandfather. And actually that was more stressful than playing it at any film festival or like any of the Academy stuff. Cause I'm like, if anyone's going to be critical of this film, it's going to be, it's going to be these people from this community.
They were there.
But the outreach and support of it was like really amazing. And I talked to a lot of amazing people there too. And so like I'm Yonsei, which is 4th generation, and Sansei's 3rd generation. And so actually this woman who's a historian, she came up to me, and she's Sansei, and she was basically like, what made you want to tell this story? And I asked in the sense of like, we're trying to get more youth involved in keeping these stories alive. And in many ways, we feel like we're failing as a generation because we don't know how to reach that engagement. And I said, first of all, like, I don't see what you're trying to do. I don't see it as a failure because, one, I wouldn't want my grandfather telling my mom these stories when she's a little kid, right? Uh-huh. Like, I don't think a parent should put that on their children. And 2, it's like finding a way to engage people and keep these stories alive through, what you're good at. And for me, being a narrative filmmaker and using this as a platform, like at the end of the day, like, what I tell through this story, I still think is kind of a very broad overview of what the community went through, obviously because of time-wise and budget-wise. But the idea is like it's commercial enough for someone who doesn't know the story. It's still a good movie at the end of the day for you to watch it and enjoy it. And then maybe that makes you go on Wikipedia. Maybe that makes you go on Google and type in 442nd internment camps. Maybe that makes you stop at Manzanar when you're driving through Central California. And so this film isn't the end all be all, but it's the opening conversation to getting new voices and maybe younger voices involved.
There is no end all be all. There's no end all be all movie at all. Everything's an introduction. It's an invitation for you to learn more. And that's the beautiful thing about today's society. I mean, we can all learn. We're flipping omnipotent, right? I mean, we've got information at our fingertips. As you can tell, I always geek out. I geek out with this guy. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. Please support our sponsors. We'll be right back with more. Here's what we know. Darren Haruo Rae coming up. If you're looking for Western wear, you need to find Winchester Western Wear at 1185 South Bascom Avenue in San Jose. You're not going to find the perfect outfit at the mall or the outlets. Come to the place with over 40 years of experience and all the top name brands like Ariat, Justin, Stetson, Tony Lama, and more. When you go to the great country shows at Shoreline, SAP, Club Rodeo, or Clola Shans, you'll be looking your best. From boots to hats to everything in between, with a knowledgeable staff that'll make the entire experience a fun one. Find them online at winchesterww.com. That's winchesterww.com. Or put this in your maps. 1185 South Bascom Avenue in San Jose. Winchester Western Wear. They'll help you find a look you love. Let's talk about the inevitable. End of life.
Once I leave this earth, I can't do anything for my loved ones, but I've just learned by pre-planning a funeral or cemetery in advance takes the guesswork out when death occurs suddenly and your mind is clouded with grief. Dignity Memorial can help. My friend Tina Skurla pre-plans funeral and cemetery arrangements so loved ones don't have to. They're North America's largest provider of funeral, cremation, and cemetery services. They're dedicated to getting every detail right, and they do that by listening to you. I know it's a hard subject, but I also know we all see the sense and value of what Dignity Memorial does. Use the promo code Gary to get 25% off at Willow Glen Funeral Home. Reach out to my friend Tina Skurla today. She's committed to helping families not go through the tragedy of loss alone. Click on the link, use the promo code Gary, or email her at dmppatinaskurla.com or call 408-398-7050.
So I want to tell you about our new sponsor, The Gym Guys. I have been working out with them for over a year now. It all started with the pandemic and there was no place to go. The gyms were closed, all that kind of stuff. I found The Gym Guys because they come to you. The commute is theirs. Isn't that one of the worst parts of working out? Is you have to factor in the commute time? Not with The Gym Guys. And it's more motivating. It's one thing to say, I'm going to work out today. It's another thing if you know, like, I have Luciana coming over today at 11:15. I got to be ready for it. And then they change the workouts up for you. They give you an app, so when you're working out on your own, you know how to do it right and what you're trying to do. And they also give you access to a nutritionist. It's all there for you. You can take it as, if you're just starting your journey, or maybe you want to take your journey to the next level. They've even got a contest on how you can win 100 free sessions with your friends and coworkers. It's at thebiggestmover.com, thebiggestmover.com. But you'll find The Gym Guys on the web, GYMGUYZ. So let's get back to, I don't want to drop off one more serendipitous thing, right?
Okay.
So you're going to do a World War II story. You're going to need World War II tanks. You're going to need World War II things. Where do you find those things? And?
Again, it's talking about, like, I wrote it and we're like, we don't know if we really have a game plan for this yet, but it's the idea of, like, wanting to push myself as a filmmaker. And so, like, obviously we talked about how we found the bus. We filmed a scene inside of internment camp where he visits his father, and that's actually at the Japanese American Museum of San Jose. So they actually have a replica of the Tule Lake camps there, and that was the founder of the museum built it because he was a child at Tule Lake. So we built it to what he remembered, and so we were very fortunate to partner with them and letting us use their space. And then friend of a friend, back when I was in college, I remember my old roommate did like this war film, and there was like some World War II stuff, and I was like, hey, like, do you still have that guy's contact information? And I emailed him, didn't hear back from like 2 months. And then the guy got back to me. He goes, oh, actually, I have a new email. I don't check this one anymore. He just happened to see my email. And so he replied on his new email. And so the gentleman's name's Hans Bierbaum, and he lives up in Petaluma. And he basically just has a collection of World War II things for, like, 88 cannons, tanks, artillery, MG, 42, stuff like that. And so when you watch the film and you see the battle scene that takes place in Italy, that's actually his backyard. We had to matte paint out a couple of modern houses in the background just so it looked period correct. But literally, like, that whole scene with the cottage and everything, that is his property. And he was very accommodating and with the sense of, like, hey, like, one, can we, like, blow up your cottage? Two, can we dig a bunch of, like, foxholes and trenches and stuff? And he goes, yeah, sure, do whatever you want. And super accommodating to it. And we actually, like, stayed in his house and lived there while we were filming it too.
Just saying. I'm just saying, everything lines up for a reason. And I love the fact because, it is true. It's not just, we should never forget the Japanese internment. And this story about the Nisei, the people who fought, right? It's so important. But the truth of it is, time marches on. We're forgetting World War II history. As you said, it's very rare to meet a World War II veteran now. My father, and I told you that, fought in World War II. And I remember my son coming home to do a report one day, and he goes, do we have anybody in our family who actually fought World War II? And I had to tell them, your grandfather did. Now, he passed away many years, because I was an oops baby and I didn't have my kids till later. So, but I was like, I had to let them know, yeah, your grandfather fought in World War II. And they're like, their first thought was, how old are you? And I'm like, I know, right? I know. My dad fought in World War II. But we lose those stories, just like when I was growing up. You know what I didn't know about? World War I.
Right.
And there could not have been a bigger thing in the history of mankind. And literally, this was in 1919. And 30, 40 years later, like 1920 to 1970, when I was a kid. So 50 years later, I didn't know. I know more about it now because I've taught myself. And there's been more and more wonderful films about it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so we learned that. And I think this is so cool because you're right. It will introduce people to go and check this out. And it will do that. And I don't think this story is over for you yet. I think this short film is going to lead to a big film. That's just me talking, right? I mean, is that something was that ever in the back of your mind that I'd like to get, this is really using the Hollywood talk. Is it the treatment for the large film?
Actually, yeah, yes, it is. Before we even did the short, like I was kind of toying with the idea of like, maybe like it's a pilot, maybe it is like a Band of Brothers miniseries or something like that. And part of me doing this short was a proof of concept, one, to prove myself as a director, but also prove, that this story is viable and that people want to see it. And so like, I'm actually like, by the end of the year, I'm developing the feature script for this too. And so using this as a platform to continue that story. And it's been really eye-opening and fun from like doing the short and seeing like what I want to do, not differently, but like my growth as a filmmaker too. And so it's like doing like the feature version, for example, like I want to explore way more of what it was like inside the internment camps, what it meant being a woman in the internment camps, what it meant being a child in the internment camps too. And so it's like in real life, like my grandfather had his sister, and his sister got separated because my grandfather and his brother went and volunteered. Their father went to the extremist camp at Tule Lake, and she got stuck by herself in Topaz. And so it's like, what does that mean? Like her being alone in this facility without like, having a family or support system too. And meanwhile, you cut to his little brother, Harry, reciting the Pledge of Allegiance in this school inside the camp while he's overseas, killing, people on a battlefield. And so it's just really showing this dichotomy of all these things happening and all these different viewpoints of it too. And the reality is, there were a lot of people in the camps that didn't want to volunteer, that didn't approve, and they were vehemently against everything that was happening. And so it's like those stories are just as important too. And I think you need both sides of it, right? Like you need those people that are rebelling against it or saying this is a terrible thing and being that voice of this is not okay. We need to like keep, we need to remember this. We need to point out the government and tell and let people know that they can't do this stuff again. And then you have, my grandfather's side who still felt that way, but obviously they volunteered, but you have the heroism of it too. You show that these people can, are first and foremost good people.
Uh-huh.
Good people just trying to do the right thing. And so when you have these both sides of the story and you kind of combine them, it creates this larger voice for the whole community, I think, too. And like a perfect example of that is there's a scene in the film where when he goes and sees his father and he goes and talks to the MP to let him in. And what happened in real life was he goes up to the MP and he's like, I'm here to see my father. And he's like, you can't come in here. Like the Japanese Americans in here are going to like try to kill you if they see you in uniform. Because they think you betrayed them. And so what ended up happening was they had to wait till nightfall. He had to take off his military uniform. They had to put civilian clothes on him, and they had to sneak him into his father's barrack in the middle of the night because they were afraid that the Japanese Americans in the camps were going to like stone him. And so, yeah.
I had never heard that story. I have never heard that was a situation. Dude, this may be bigger than a movie. You're right. This may need to be a Netflix series or Amazon or Prime, something like that, because this needs a lot of texture. This needs a lot of explanation. I mean, I'm not the most historical person you've ever met, but I don't think I'm the worst, right? I try to be a little bit aware of things that are going around. And the fact that I did not know, you called it an extremist camp. Is that what you called it?
Yeah.
I had no idea there was such a definition. Dude, this is blowing my mind. how could I be this many days old and only learn about this right now?
Yeah, and that was kind of like some people refer to it as that. That was Tule Lake specifically, and basically what happened was they released this questionnaire to the Japanese Americans in the camp, and then it became known as the No Boys. And there was these two questions that were asked on the document, and if you said no to both of those, you were seen as disloyal to America. And one of them was like, would you volunteer for the military? Would you disavow like the Emperor of Japan and stuff like that? And those questions, people were like, I feel like this is an attack because like I feel like no matter what I answered, this is you trying to say that I'm not American to begin with. And so like some people, like my great grandfather, it was a language barrier issue. Like he barely spoke English. So he got sent to the camp, not necessarily because he was an extremist as they were labeled. It was just because he didn't speak English very well and they were concerned about that. Other people, they said no to the questionnaire because they're like, I'm not going to volunteer. You're putting me in prison. Why would I volunteer? But that doesn't mean I'm un-American. I just don't want to, sacrifice my life for a country that's sticking me, in the middle of the country in these barracks for 2 years. And so you do have these people that are like vehemently against America, but then you're also partnering with people that are just trying to live their life and just trying to do what they feel is right for themselves and their family too. And so there's so many interesting stories in that regard, like within the camps themselves. And like for me as a filmmaker, like what's very fascinating, I think like for any film in general, it's about like what is the intent of a person or a character in a scene, like why are they doing this? And I think like you think of like villains in films, and certain villains maybe resonate more than others, and it's you realize it's like not that you agree with why they're doing things, but you understand their intent, you understand their purpose. And I think that works for all characters, and what makes a good interesting story is like you can see why they're doing something or wanting to do something.
Yeah, but it's the fact that, they weren't doing that with German Americans. They weren't doing that with Italian Americans.
They did a little bit, actually.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but nothing to the extent of what we did with Japanese Americans.
And the funny thing about that too was specifically on the West Coast, 120,000 Japanese Americans up and down the coast, up in Canada a little bit too. They didn't do it in Hawaii though, even though you seem like that would, Hawaii is the closest one to Japan, right? And the only reason why they didn't do it in Hawaii was because if they did that, that would be like half of the workforce on the entire island. So like if they did that, the island would just shut down. So their reasoning for it didn't really, it kind of like it didn't hold water once it came to like, well, why isn't Hawaii having internment camps too? So
here's the good news. I mean, we can sit back and see injustice in the world today, but the truth of it is the injustice that used to be okay is not okay now. Mm-hmm. I grew up in South Alabama in the 60s, right? And I can sit back and have people say, oh, there's a lot of racial injustice or systemic racism. And my thing is, and this is just my experience, right? So I'm not compared to what I've seen, not toward what I've seen with my own eyes, not compared to what I've seen in my own family. I had an uncle who was a KKK member. It's one of the reasons I left is I couldn't take it. To see so much progress, I say that simply because we should take pride in that. We should hold on to it, to know that we will never go back there. Right. And the reason these stories are important is because you don't ever want to forget that. It's so easy to scapegoat as we take this, right? I mean, we're going through a lot of problems in the Middle East, and everybody just wants to blanket everyone. And you can't. Life would be great if it was black or white. There are some actions that are black and white. You do not kill babies. You just don't. But not everything is black and white. And I think I would love to see this as a series because I think it adds so much texture to it, right? And this may be, it's not your life work. It's just part of your life's work. I mean, this is going to be an integral part of what you do. And you're the perfect person to do it. Like I said, we can call it serendipity. We can call it that. But how many things have had to line up? And I'm telling you, I'm really excited about this, about where this is going, especially with the award seasons going on. I think it's really cool. How do you make your money back? Can I ask that question? Just to be brutally honest. Because you guys self-funded this, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So this was you guys saving and working and not going out to eat and not taking vacations and all of this stuff.
Right. Right. I mean, in all honesty, from a short perspective, like making a short film, you're not going to make your money back. And I kind of went into that knowing this. And I think I talked before where it's like I've been in the TV world for a while. I was a dolly grip working on shows, and I would just like save my money and put it towards that because I always knew I wanted to get back towards directing and doing, this something that I was very passionate about. And so I never went into this with the intent of like I need to recoup the cost on it. Like one, it's a calling card for me, um, you know, for myself as a filmmaker. On top of like it's a very passionate story that I want to tell, and like the more people that see it, the better. Whether it's after the festival run, I'm sure we're going to try to put it up for free somewhere or try to like donate it to museums and stuff like that. That's what's important to me. Like it's not about the money at this point or ever was. It's just continuing this ride about keeping these stories alive. And like you said, like I do think it is important, not just from like a Japanese American standpoint, but learning these things that have happened in the past, learning these things that the government has done or people have done to each other. And I think the best way you can approach that is making things anecdotal, making it, humanizing people, showing, you talk about like 100 people or 1,000 people, it may be hard to associate. But if you show one person or you show like a family and show their struggles, then it's much more relatable where it's like, that could happen to me. You know what I mean? Like that could, I can see that. That could be my little brother. That could be my father. That could be my sister. And so, at the end of the day, that's what's important to me. And like I said, the Academy stuff, great. That's just icing on the cake, and I hope it continues. And I'm always hoping we go farther and farther. But I'm just happy where we are right now. So
I know this is a big part of what because you're going through this push. But what else are you working on right now? What else is on your plate? Because as most people in the creative endeavor, you're never just doing one thing.
Right. Right. So yeah, like I said, like we're developing the feature of this, of what it would look like expanded. And actually beginning of next year, Jessica and I were both producing a film for a Chinese American director. The title is Surrender, and it deals with gambling addiction, specifically in the Asian community. And so it's something that's, very prevalent, never talked about. A lot of casinos tend to prey on Asian communities in general because of our belief system of fate, luck, and fortune. And so it's really taking a deep, hard look at that again from like an anecdotal, like singular person story of that. So that way it makes it relatable, but just really seeing how harmful and how it's just, I don't want to say not common knowledge because I feel like most people can see like people gambling and have addiction. It's just not talked about, especially within the Asian community. So.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me because, I'm aware of a gambling problem in the Asian community, and I've seen all of the ads. And if you ever see a billboard on the freeway, they always have it in different languages, right? But I've never thought about why it's so prevalent in the Asian community. And as you said, fate, luck, and fortune. Or what were the three things you said?
Yeah, fate, luck, and fortune. I think part of it is like, some of the belief system, and also just like, at least from my experience in the Japanese community too, it's like you don't really talk about stuff. Like you don't want to show signs of weakness too. So, that stuff kind of compounds on this under layer that no one talks about, especially, you talk about the model minority myth of being this perfectionist, being docile, being, you can't show any flaws. And so it's like basically like this extreme version of having these, inner demons, having this trauma. And a lot of times like people don't have a place to talk about it. Mental health is a conversation that is still like a very new, like being able to comfortably talk about it with family members and friends and stuff like that. And so I think a lot of people put their issues towards different things, and like gambling is one of them. Right. So.
Oh, I've never had a gambling problem because, to tell you the truth, I can't stand. I'll never win big because I never risk big. I'd go to Vegas, and if I lost $20, all I could think of was back in the old days that was a meal. Now if you lose $20, that's a drink. But it's a drink I could have bought. That I've never had that. I've never had that proclivity. Just to go. And I've got friends and they don't have problems, but they'll go when they go to Vegas, they'll spend money, but then they never do it again, but they don't think anything of it. I'm like, I don't know. I'm
Well, everyone says it's that free drink. Like, oh, you get free drinks when you do it, but then you end up spending more than if you just bought the drink. So,
Well, for a while there, they stopped even doing free drinks unless you were really gambling a lot, right?
Mm.
Because it was like Vegas kind of figured out we don't need to do any dang thing for free. The whole point of Vegas when I first moved to California was, yeah, come over here. We've got a $25 room and a $2 buffet. Come on. It's going to cost you nothing. Gamble. And then Vegas figured out, hold it, we can charge you $800 for the room and each meal will average $300 and you'll pay it. Okay.
yeah, it's really like even doing this film and kind of like everyone knows it, but like really kind of deep diving into like what a casino's business model is too, right? And you realize it's like, oh, your whole thing is basically ripping people off from their money, like in any way possible, whether it's flashing colors, with slots, or like, oh, now we have 6-5 blackjack instead of 4-3, which is actually a worse ratio, like a lower chance of winning and stuff like that. So it's always like it feels like it's like they're con artists. So.
Well, I had someone tell me in the financial business one time that most hotels make their operating expenses for the year in 4 months, just off the gambling.
Mm.
So in 4 months, they paid for the staff, they paid for food, and they paid for entertainment. Anything they make off that, all those other things, is great. But we do that in 4 months.
Right.
I mean, think about that. It's crazy.
Right. And I mean, like, you even take like the kind of glamour and gloss of like Vegas away from this too. And so it's like the film is, based on our director, she kind of went through some of this in her early 20s. And it's like, you don't go to Vegas every time. You go to a card room in Los Angeles or San Francisco or San Jose, and you go to those places. We actually filmed the proof of concept short during COVID, and we were filming because we had to film around operating hours. We were filming at like Monday at like 3 a.m. And let me tell you, the people that are playing on Monday at 3 a.m. are not happy to be there. It is a completely different vibe than when you're
chasing.
Like
if you're there Monday at 3 a.m., you're chasing.
Right. And it is very eye-opening and really sad. So I'm excited for this project, and it'll be good and shed some light on this topic as well. I stay in the world of very happy, lighthearted.
You'll get your chance. You'll get your chance of doing something fun and a comedy and yeah, you got that there. It's coming, right? Yes. I mean, so it's if you've got to understand tragedy before you'll ever understand comedy, and vice versa. You can't just do one or the other, right? You've got to understand both sides of it, and it's getting there. I am so excited for this Oscar thing, as I've told you, and I can't wait till I get till we do another one where we talk about your Oscar nominated and then Oscar winning, and then go from there. I'm hitching my wagon to your star is what I'm going to do.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the kind words, and yeah, hopefully people see it. Hopefully people vote for it, and it'll be exciting.
All right. Well, next time you come up to San Jose, how about let me know, and we'll go grab something, whether it's coffee or a cocktail or lunch or something.
I would love that. Yes.